I'm so privileged to have Sally Carstens here, a really good friend of mine. If you're a mother and you have a child or a husband with ADHD, I think the first person I would call is Sally. Sally, how did you get into the field and where did you build your wealth of knowledge on ADHD from?
Well, life takes you down a path, and my path with my son, he was diagnosed when he was 4 years old. And that was the start of my journey and discovery on being a mother to an ADHD child. And I just laughed or smiled when you mentioned the husband, because further down the track one realizes exactly where the gene pool came from. But that journey was really about trying to become as informed as possible. I was very fortunate in that I come from a medical background and I'm involved in the medical field. So I had so many people that offered advice and substance to me to assist me in helping my son, who today is a wonderful 27-year-old young man. But it has really been a journey of discovery, and constantly there are new options coming out and ways that you can assist, support and help these people with ADHD. I do believe that very often we have always thought it to be a disadvantageous condition, but I think that there are a lot of masters of industry that are there because they did have the condition.
Wasn't it incredibly confusing for you to get all this different advice thrown at you at a time when you were obviously desperate to have a quick solution?
Well, a strange thing about parenting is denial is the first step in the process. And it took me 6 visits to different healthcare professionals before I accepted the diagnosis of ADHD with my son, because for me he was just a normal, very busy little boy who didn't sleep much at night.
Is that why you went to your medical doctor?
Yes, I actually spoke to one of the doctors at Red Cross Hospital. I was busy in patient education there, and I was feeling particularly down because I'd got a bad report from his preschool teacher, which was sort of the start of things. And she said to me, you know, we just can't get Ryan to calm down and to come inside and sit on the mat and tell stories. And I was chatting to the one doctor who headed up a department at Red Cross, and he said to me, have you ever considered that your son might have ADHD? And I said, don't be ridiculous. My husband's quite a similar person, so I would imagine that he's you know, just a similar natured child. And that was why I think there was this hesitance to actually get the diagnosis. And he wasn't at a stage where I was seeing poor results in a classroom or noticing social interaction being difficult. He was a very well-liked child, and probably because he was the one prepared to do any of the high-risk things. So if they wanted a Superman, he would be Superman in a big way. If they wanted Evel Knievel, he would do exactly the same.
Right.
Everything being dangerous and to the nth degree. So no consideration of consequence.
Okay.
And as a mom, I just thought, well, he was a very big baby at birth, and that's just who he is. You know, once they then got into a more formal environment and I saw other children interacting, I realized that he was outside of that environment.
Okay. So the first advice that you received from medical professional, was that go for the big guns, here's the drugs?
It was quite interesting, because the very first advice that I got from a healthcare professional was in the allergy clinic at Red Cross Hospital. And the doctor actually said to me, there's some very early research on essential fatty acids playing a role in children that have allergies, and that he obviously asked me about, he had allergic rhinitis, if he had any other allergies, and he said that there seems to be some type of link, and that was a long time ago, before the research that we know today really started to expand.
I'm really impressed. That's fantastic advice to get the first just a thought in your mind that maybe there's an alternative to a drug option.
Yeah, well, I think that, as I said to you, it is about managing the child as you go through the different developmental milestones with the child, is to realize that maybe they need another platform to help them succeed. So it's not just looking at the child in terms of medication, it's not just looking at the child in terms of school support or academic support. It's looking at the child in terms of social support, in terms of counselling to help me manage him in a home environment. It's looking at what we feed him. It's looking at creating boundaries and creating parameters that he can thrive within and not constantly feel that he is being only being caught up for the poor things that he does, rather try and enhance the good things that he does. And then obviously getting him to understand that in a more formal setting like a school environment, that there are rules, that there are boundaries, and that in life does throw boundaries at you, and you need to realize the consequences if you step outside of those boundaries, because it affects other people. So it was on a social level, it was on a scholastic level, it was on a dietary level, it was on a clinical level. He had a little bit of occupational therapy, quite an interesting story. He was a 5.3 kilogram birth weight baby. Wow. So he walked at 9 months. And I was a very proud mom to say, wow, you know, phoned my mom. I said, Ryan's walking. And my mom actually said to me, but he didn't crawl. And I said, but that's okay because he's strong. And what I didn't realize with the crawling, it's part of neural pruning, and it's very required to actually get your neural processing to be quicker. So what we assume to be a child that is advanced, actually we were disadvantaging him.
So he's missed steps.
He missed steps in his developmental milestones, and so we went back to an occupational therapist, and they helped him with exercises and specific things that he had to do to actually do the neural pruning at a later stage. Obviously, we weren't going to get a 6-year-old to crawl on the floor because they would be very hesitant to do that. But there were other exercises that created the environment for his brain to be more optimum.
Right. I think this is what is so incredibly valuable having you here. It's the holistic approach that is the long-lasting one that makes sense. It's not, oh, my child has ADHD, what option of medication do I choose, and then it's done.
Yes. Well, you know, having been down the track now for 23 years with him, at every stage there was a reassessment. So when he went from primary school to senior school, we reassessed him. We understood what his needs were at that stage. His days were longer. His study requirements were longer. We very carefully chose his subjects when he needed to make a subject choice, to make sure that predominantly he was being channeled into subjects that he had a personal interest in. So you'll find a child with ADHD loves history, because they can imagine, they've got a furtive imagination, they can imagine the war happening, and they can imagine the guns going off, and they can imagine that whole picture. And of course, they play it out in their minds, and it's a permanent story, so they love that type of thing. But when I said to him, Ryan, you know, could you try and just make a difference with your English and Afrikaans, with your languages? He said to me, but I don't understand, I can speak both of them, and I don't understand why I need to write exams on them. If I can speak them, I'm okay. So it's just really then going really deep, more in depth into education as to why you need those other subjects. Another really sweet story with him, when he had his very first test in grade 3. The teacher called me and she said to me, your son has handed in a paper with his name and the date, not very well written because he had shocking handwriting, still does today. And that's all. And, you know, did he actually study? And I said to her, absolutely. I went through the information with him. He studied. And I said, but have you asked him why there were no answers? And she said, no, I haven't. So I said, well, should we call him in? And then I then said to him, Ryan, you know, you wrote a test yesterday and your teacher says that you just put your name on the page and the date. Was there any reason why you didn't fill the answers? And he said, because it's a waste of ink and my teacher knows the answers. So with a child with ADHD, you have to explain the rationale behind the exercise for them to fully comprehend why they're going through the process.
There's a lot to this condition.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's along the way, it's quite sweet when one remembers back, but you can imagine the frustration of a teacher who will have a percentage of her classroom who have ADHD, and then she's got the rest of the classroom to deal with. And you've got these hyperactives that can't sit still, they've got ants in their pants. You've just got to develop really clever ways to manage them without them feeling not part of the group.
And really know your child.
Absolutely.
Apart from the psychological and you know, all the social challenges involved, can you give advice on dietary dietary recommendations or supplementation, medication?
Absolutely. Very definitely the research now says that these children obviously have a very rapid metabolism, especially your hyperactive children. But in fact, all children, we eat a lot of processed foods, we eat a lot of foods with high sugar content. And if you can imagine a child in a classroom that's just had a high sugar intake for breakfast, by 9 o'clock they're needing to concentrate in a classroom, they've had high sugar intake, their insulin kicks in, they drop their blood glucose levels, they're now fidgeting because they can't concentrate because the sugar levels are too low to allow them to actually concentrate significantly in the classroom. So the recommendation really is high protein for breakfast with a complex carbohydrate that will allow them to sustain their energy until little break when they can have
Give our viewers an example of that breakfast.
The breakfast would be a boiled egg on whole wheat toast with a slice of cheese and maybe a piece of spinach if they like that type of thing, or egg in a cup, or you could even have mince on toast. So that type of thing, it does take a little bit extra effort, but if you're sort of a sandwich and go person, which a lot of the ADHD children will say, oh, no, I don't have time for breakfast because they're still getting dressed when they run out the door. A smoothie is a really good idea. That's got a really strong protein content to it with ground nuts and fruit, etc. So that they're getting a full sort of amount of nutritional value in their smoothie.
Right.
Yeah.
And the medication side of it, any advice?
So I think that the important thing is to not exclude the possibility of medication, but before we go down the road of treatment, there's a step that one needs to consider before that. And that very, very clearly is to go to a qualified healthcare professional to get a differential diagnosis. Why do I say this? Because ADHD as a condition, or ADD as a condition, very seldomly exists as a single entity. You very often have overlapping comorbid conditions. So those are additional conditions that coexist with the ADHD diagnosis. So, for instance, you have a child that has petit mal epilepsy. So every now and then in the classroom, the teacher's saying, your child looks a little bit spacey and they're not with us and they're missing parts of the lesson and we think they've got ADD. So that's without the hyperactive component. If you don't then take them to a healthcare professional to actually assess what's really going on, and it's quite a lengthy process, it's in 3 different settings over 6 months with similar outcomes in all 3 settings. You could have a child that is put onto ADHD medication who in fact has petit mal epilepsy. And if they were given epileptic medication, they actually wouldn't have ADHD because it's then controlling the epilepsy. Similarly, you could have a child that has got an overlap with Tourette's syndrome. Tourette's syndrome very often is aggravated with the use of similar medication that we use for ADHD. So you need to look at the primary need to treat and then slowly build your treatment regime around that. So I was lucky because I was a very involved mom, and I really made it my business to become as informed as possible about all the options open to my child. I provided different platforms for him that we only really need to consider medication when he went to tertiary level of education, which when he went to university. And then he was actually on quite a high dose of similar medication, and people were actually astounded that that was the first time he had needed to take medicine. But I must just say that all the other platforms were in place. So he knew when he needed to tone down, he knew when he needed to focus, he needed to control those outbursts that the limbic system produces where inappropriate things are said and done. And
how would a child control that?
Well, it's just teaching them the triggers. So just a little thing in a classroom. I was speaking to a teacher fairly recently where she had a very hyperactive little boy in the classroom, but the child's level of self-esteem was really not great. And it was because he was constantly being reprimanded in the classroom because he was always fidgeting and chatting to the boy behind and doing things that he shouldn't have been doing. So I said to her, have you thought about just getting one pen that is a specific color, and every time he is out of control, just go and put your pen on his desk. Don't say anything to him. Tell him that that's his signal. And he will know that he's actually got to calm down, and nobody else will know that that's your signal. So it's a little bit of a secret, plan that you have, and then the child buys into it because it's their secret with you. So it's just something small that can happen. So
and it takes away the humiliation.
It takes away the humiliation, and it maintains the self-esteem. So the children don't say, well, you know, Jack is always misbehaved in the classroom, and so we're not going to invite him to our party because he'll come to our home and break things. Is to that teach them. You need to say to them, you know, you have a lot of energy, so you just need to be careful and realize that other people are not the same as you. So watch what's going on and then try and behave like the other children, which sometimes doesn't work. When they're little, you've got to teach them the process to do it. But my son has a habit. If I used to do this, I say, if you see the bunny, you know that you need to make sure your ears are up. So it was just doing this, and he knew from me. But then to get that was my signal to him, was to just be a bunny. So it was just little things that one can do, and then you know you also need to look at the whole environment. I have a younger daughter who doesn't have ADHD, and at age 10, she said to me, "Mom, do you love my brother more than me?" And I said, "Why are you asking me that question? Of course not." She said, "Because whenever he asks you for help with his homework, you say, 'Sure, well, I'll come and help you right now.' But when I ask you, you always say to me, 'But I know that you can do it, so you try first and then I'll come later.'" So it's explaining to them that it is different, and also then just managing the process throughout. And mothers are human, so to err is human, and we make mistakes. All mothers make mistakes. There's no such thing as perfect parenting. You've got to find your sweet spot with your child and their siblings and within the family environment. So it's really about looking at it holistically. But along my journey, so following on from the diet, I had the opportunity, I was approached by a company to market a product which was in the natural field that was said to produce results in ADHD children. And at that stage, I was working for a pharmaceutical company, and I was involved in clinical research, and I really was very hesitant to look at any route that didn't have research behind it. So I said to my potential employer, no, I'm not prepared to sell any Mama Promise in a bottle, because I know how hard this road has been for me, and I really need to look at some research. Anyway, I put my son onto the product before it was launched in South Africa. In the September of that year, he was 13 years old. And by the December, he said to me, "Mom, this is not the same as my other vitamins." And I said, "Okay, you tell me why. I'm not going to tell you anything. You tell me why." So he said, "Well, for the first time, I'm not biting my nails. I'm able to grow my nails." I said, "That's quite interesting. Why? Is it because you're not anxious, or why do you bite your nails?" And he said, "No, I bite my nails because they just peel off." Interestingly, that's a symptom of a fatty acid deficiency, which I hadn't exposed him to, and you know, I knew that that was in the research.
And the product was an essential fatty acid product.
Was an essential fatty acid supplement. And then I said to him, "And what else?" And he said, "And Mom, you know, I don't sleep a lot at night, but when I do go to sleep, nothing bothers me. Nothing bothers me. My mind is not busy. I get to sleep more easily." And he said, we've had springtime and I've had no hay fever. So another possible physical symptom of a fatty acid deficiency that can be assisted with the support of essential fatty acids. And then the last thing that he said to me, he said, "I'm sure it's not the oil that I'm taking, but I just feel happy." And for a mother, there's nothing that you want to hear more than "I'm feeling happy." And especially at the end of their sort of grade 7 school year, I thought he would be under pressure and stressed and really frantic. And he said to me, "I'm happy and I'm excited about high school." So I just thought, okay, I can do this. I've seen actual physical results in my own son. I understand, we have a very open and honest relationship. I understand his feeling of self-esteem was healthy. And then the research started coming through, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's try this. And I was very, very fortunate to have been able to launch IQ in South Africa in the February of 2014. So since then, that has been sort of my journey with my own son.
Can I just interrupt you here? I have to tell my readers, don't stop watching. This is not a push for IQ. This is a woman that's been through her own journey, and I've heard you give advice to mothers saying, if it doesn't work for you, do not throw away the other options, that you believe in an integrative approach.
Absolutely. And if you speak to any in-the-know ADHD experts, they will say to you that a multidisciplinary intervention really is the best platform to provide a successful outcome for any child. And every single child is uniquely different, so their needs are uniquely different. And we do know that the more platforms you use, the better the outcome. So you need the social support, you need the emotional support, you need the academic support. If you need stimulant medication because the child is severely on the severe spectrum of the ADHD scale, don't not consider it. It definitely makes a difference in the right child. It really can be aligned to a child not wearing reading glasses because it doesn't look cool. It makes that amount of difference to a child. So it's literally refocusing and rewiring what is not working so well. So in the right child, it works like a dream. But I would always say, maybe look at using the other platforms alongside it, because you then are getting the optimal result at the lowest dose with the best outcome.
Right. Maybe please put your email address on this video so that our readers and viewers can contact you.
With absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Sally. Thank you. Thank you so much. And in closing, Sally, would you please just explain the social outreach program that you have launched in South Africa?
Well, it's my great pleasure and privilege to be able to say that this is the year that we really want to embrace children's results. We want to embrace whether they have challenges or whether they don't have challenges, the fact that they can pick up their game. They might have received a report that wasn't so great in June, July. And what SFI have done is they have launched a social responsibility program that is open to the whole of South Africa.
SFI is the company behind IQ.
Correct.
Global.
Yes, right. That's right. So in South Africa, what we've got running in all 5 provinces, we would like the readers to look at their June results, and if they have a wonderful improvement in those results in December, we'd like them to actually submit those results to us. It's called the Embrace campaign, so it's sfiembrace.co.za, that they can log in and enter this competition, and 5 children around South Africa can win an iPad as an early Christmas present based on their wonderful results. We want them to be embracing of championing their year, their academic year. We also are making a contribution to Reach for a Dream, because those children as well we would like to support them reaching something that is special in their lives. And we are doing it in combination with professional minds who are actually assisting us with the assessment of the reports that we receive. And Dis-Chem is our preferred provider of the IQ brand in partnership with SFI Flawless.
So is the condition that they have to take IQ during this period?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
All children may enter this competition. And we really hope that we'll get lots of entrants and lots of wonderful stories to share, because it's important to realize and embrace children becoming their own true hero.
I'd love to report on that in the new year.
Would be fantastic.
And all the best.
Great.
Thank you so much. Always lovely to see you.
Likewise.